A very warm welcome to all of you in our audience today. My name is Abhilasha, and I am a leadership and life coach, and I am your host for this session. So let's turn off all distractions to fully enjoy this great conversation for which we are here. Our first panelist is a very dynamic personality. He is the CEO of Randstad Japan, which is the global leader in the HR services industry. From a young Canadian backpacker sleeping on a park bench in Japan to leading one of the biggest corporate giants in the Asia Pacific region, he has built a career through game changing leadership, crafted through his own real life experiences as an athlete, volunteer, and CEO. His E5 framework is a unique leadership model, a call to action to all leaders globally to inspire and lead for change. He spent 4 incredible years in India as the CEO of Randstad India. He is a passionate learner and has experienced firsthand the power of coaching with support from his own coach and friend, Marshall Goldsmith. So please welcome Paul Dupuis. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hi, Abhilasha. Greetings from Tokyo. Thank you so much for the kind introduction.
Hi, Paul. It's so good to have you here. Now let me
Thank you.
introduce our second panelist. Our second panelist wears many hats. He is the MD of Esquire Healthcare and Logistics Private Limited and Director of Ensign Software and Communications Private Limited, which is a management consulting firm. He's an excellent entrepreneur and an institution builder. He has spent 35 years mentoring board members of several top MSMEs and reputed for positively transforming them through partnering. He has also contributed in the field of supply chain management across India and mentoring over 200 entrepreneurs in the last few years. His core strength is building human relationships with his team members, his clients, and carrying them along, morphed into a high-performance team. Please welcome Mr. Mohan Nair. Mohan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, last but not the least, our panel moderator, who is a powerhouse of talent. She is an executive coach with 25 years of experience in the field of talent management and leadership development. She works with clients across Fortune 500 companies and across continents. She is an expert in coaching techniques, personality, and psychometric tools, and teaches regularly at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Please welcome my very dear colleague, Tushima.
Hi, Abhilasha.
Hi, welcome
Hi.
to the session. And now I will hand the baton to you, Tushima, to take us from here.
Thank you so much, Abhi, for that lovely introduction for all of us. Set just the perfect tone for this conversation. Hi, Paul. Hi, Mohan. It's so nice to be here with you and to be talking to you again. Mohan, I think we're having a challenge hearing you still. If you could
You're
just...
not able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Perfect.
That's better. We've got you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm really in exalted company, I would say, because both of you are truly legends, self-made legends, if I can say that. You spent a lifetime building businesses, transforming so many lives around you, and transforming yourself also along the way. And apart from building businesses, you've both been practicing on your own, coaching and mentoring so many people for decades now, and I think it's going to be a great conversation. I also noticed, our topic today is really about leveraging crucial relationships to sustain business longevity, specifically in the MSME, startup, and new age entrepreneurial sector. And one of the things which I noticed in the 2 conversations that we had before this was that it took about 10 seconds for each of you to really get into the conversation, build rapport, and it was so fantastic. And the relationship got made right there at the start, and everything else just flowed beautifully after that. So I think it's going to be great for the audience as well to listen to you. So to start off with, my first question to the 2 of you would be, what's your overall perspective in terms of the unique features and challenges of this sector, MSMEs, startups, new age businesses. Mohan, could we hear from you first?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I hope you're able to hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's a great privilege to be here today with all of you. Having spent a few years starting my own journey of entrepreneurship and working with MSMEs, I think today the challenge, what I am seeing with my experience in MSMEs is India particularly is in a very different stage now. There's a lot of opportunities for growth, and the challenge is scalability. When we talk about scalability, the real challenge is managing an organization with a different game plan. In this, one of my experience is that to start business is very easy, and to continue and sustain business is very difficult. And my special, reference is towards relationship. Now, when friends come together because of personal relationship and entrepreneurial spirit and passion, they start their business. But as they go on in the business after a few years, the business organizations get into a conflict, and their businesses, many businesses die down over a period of time. So the real challenge today is how to sustain business, grow business, and maintain this relationship and continue this relationship. The opportunities are great, but the challenges are also even greater. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohan. Paul, what have you observed in the work that you've done across so many countries?
Well, thank you, Tushima. And just building off of what Mohan said, I spent 4 incredible years in incredible India, and now I'm here in Japan, actually the 4th time I've lived and worked around the world. And there is one thing that's borderless, and that is the importance of relationships. There's not a place on this planet where you can go where relationships are not important, especially important for the MSMEs. When you're a startup, a venture, or a family-owned company, whatever it is, the reality is that business is done between people, not between brands. And it comes down to relationship. And what really is a relationship? It's based on trust. It's about making a promise and keeping the promise. And traditionally, founders are very good at this. And Tushima, and I'm sure Mohan, you've seen it as well. Founders of companies are very good at establishing from a zero start that element of trust. The challenge comes, as Mohan said, is how do you scale that? How does one person then inject that spirit of trust and building relationships into an entire organization as it grows to 20, 30, 50, 100, or 1,000 people? And so that's one of the challenges I have leading a very, very large organization. But at my heart, I'm an entrepreneur. I had my own company and sold my own company in the past, and I understand the challenges. I think there is an opportunity here, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it today, for the MSMEs actually to take advantage of this moment as we move into a new world. COVID has completely flipped everything upside down to the point where we've gone back full circle to the core basics of what success is built off of, relationships. This is an opportunity, actually, I think, for anyone who's at an MSME to really go back to the core of who they are and their purpose, and to focus on that key element, which is that people don't buy from brands, they buy from people. People don't have relationships with brands, they have relationships with people. So it's a great time for us to talk about this today.
Excellent. So what I heard both of you say is that irrespective of where you are, the primary challenge, the unique challenge is not just getting things started, but keeping it going and scaling it up. And relationships play such a crucial role in doing this. And there was a very interesting point that you made, Paul, about how organizations actually do this and how the leadership actually leverages this. So that takes me to another question which I had, which is those who are doing it right, the success stories that you've seen, the ones who are able to sustain, the ones who are able to grow, transform, what are they doing to get it right? Paul, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to make a comment. And I think it's a great question, Tushima. I encourage all leaders to ask yourselves these questions sometimes. Who's getting it right? Who's not getting it right? And learn from both, right? There are a lot of organizations and leaders out there who are getting it right. And there are some who are not. And I think the first thing is going back to purpose. We talk a lot about purpose more and more in the past couple of years. really, what is your core driver? What gets you up in the morning as a leader, but also as an organization? What is the impact you intend to make on the world? And reminding yourselves of that often. And of course, taking that message not only to your team, to your colleagues, but also taking it externally. What we're finding is that a lot of people choose to do business with those who have purpose. So we see a lot of organizations now working with each other because they have a shared purpose. And that purpose can be something about making the world a better place. It could be for society. Of course, a business is at one point expected to generate revenue and profit. That's always an ultimate outcome, but that can also have a really important benefit to the world around us. So I think, one of the things I see that a lot of organizations are doing really well is they've taken their core values and their mission and so on off the wall and put it down on the table, and they're actually revisiting it with their teams and talking about real, authentic ways that they can live those values, and then take that message outside the door to the world, to the market, and so on. So that's something I've seen, which is quite remarkable. If you think about an MSME that has, maybe it's not a huge organization, but they have a purpose, they have core values that day one when that company started, there was a driver, and it wasn't just profit, of course, it's one of them. To revisit those and to recalibrate and then to be proud of that message and take it outside the door is actually quite a moment. Companies that are getting it right are doing that. And by the way, they also attract great talent when they do that, because it's a compelling message. And people join people, they join stories, they join because of purpose.
Amazing. So strong sense of purpose and reiterating that constantly to keep that shared collective spirit going. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Mohan, what about you? You've been mentoring so many organizations and individuals. What are people who are getting it right doing?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Paul. Here, I want to just emphasize one more point. I think he has spoken very well. See, regarding the purpose, values, ethics, driving down within the organization. But I feel in the context of MSMEs, you have to go back to a little bit background of MSME owners, especially in a country like India. See, most of these people have either come from family management, some have come from professional background, leaving their jobs in corporates, a few friends meeting and starting business, and some have already got a background of business and they have gone in for diversification. See, one challenge what I saw across here is that investment on human capital is very less. One of the major challenges what I've seen. Those companies who have invested on human capital by training, having continuous employee engagement, these companies have shown excellent results. The challenge is the returns on investment on human capital is a very long drawn affair. And especially the owners have no patience. So whichever companies have done it, you can find significant changes. So I think the purpose when we mentioned, when it comes down to the action point, it has to be authentically done. It has to be done from the bottom of the heart. Many companies do it for just certification purpose, getting a customer on board, but it is not done from the bottom of the heart, or it is not done authentically to ensure that the results come for a long term. So I think one challenge which we are facing today is maybe corporates have done it, but in a larger perspective, a lot of MSMEs have to go along. Second is, most of the large companies, they want their vendors to change or their associates to change. But there has to be collaborative effort from the larger companies along with the MSMEs to bring that cultural change. I think if this is done on a long-term basis, I think there'll be a significant change because this encourages listening skills in the company. And I think one of the major reasons for conflict is not giving people the respect, space for expression, and also listening deeply from the heart about the people's problem. Thank you.
Wow, I think between Paul and Mohan, you've absolutely captured all the coaching competencies and beyond that so many of us who are in the field of coaching are, we're trying to get it right and trying to improve. And you talked about trust, patience, listening with an open heart, reiterating a sense of purpose, and so many other qualities. One thing that comes to my mind right now is a lot of times in my own coaching conversations, when I ask people about their relationships and how they leverage relationships, often people tend to say things like, well, relationships just have to develop organically, and it's so difficult to do that in a deliberate way. You either click with someone or you don't. And that works in professional as well as in personal circles. So when it comes to the MSME sector specifically, given that the relationship aspect is so critical, what's your advice on how entrepreneurs should really go about this?
I would be very happy to comment. Sorry, Mohan, if you'd like.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I would say, having been an entrepreneur, I'm still an entrepreneur. Now I work for the world's largest company in our industry. So I'm an intrapreneur. Absolutely have the ability to move like an entrepreneur in a large company, which, by the way, is, I think, one of the secrets of success of a large company like Randstad, is that we allow our leaders to behave like entrepreneurs, to take chances, take risks, and create a culture where it's okay to do that. When I go back to my own experience as an entrepreneur, as someone who started a company as a lone individual and scaled it up, there's a trap, and the trap is that you end up trying to go it alone. And I think the key to success, of course, comes back to relationships, but it's about building a community, a tribe, a group of people around you that you can lean on sometimes, but that you can also support, because it works both ways. So relationships serve us very well in good times and in bad. It's something that stays with me. It's one of my mantras. Build relationships. They will serve you well in good times and in bad. And sometimes it also means meeting with people to ask for advice. That's something that I, as a coach myself, I also recommend to anyone, wherever they're at in their journey, whether they're a young entrepreneur just starting out, bootstrapped, or leading a large, massive organization, to build a network of people around yourself, but also people you can ask for advice when you need advice, because we all need it at some time. There's the ironic thing, I'd be keen to hear Mohan's take on this, but when I was in my 20s and 30s, I never asked anyone for advice. I thought I knew everything. I got into my 40s, I started to realize, I need advice on things. I'm in my 50s now, I ask for advice every day from somebody. And often the people I'm asking for advice are actually some of the junior up and coming folks as well. There's no weakness in asking for advice. In fact, there's strength. And I think that's so important for leaders in MSMEs to realize. Build a community of people you can lean on and you can trade ideas with, and so on.
Lovely. So especially the point that you said about asking for advice is not a weakness, and it's a strength. And I guess that's the power of vulnerable leadership, where you can be secure in who you are and how you are, and at the same time lean on your tribe and your community, as you said. Mohan, would love to hear your take on this. What's your advice?
So I feel I have a different approach to this, particularly in MSME. See, the world is going through a very unpredictable uncertainty. Competitiveness are increasing. We talk of values, but the overall values in the world is going down, and people are so busy in their routine and fighting out their daily problems. I think there is one thing which is actually necessary, and my personal life I have seen in my own organization. I think we have spent a lot of time first creating that self-awareness. I think the inner governance today is becoming more and more weak. And I have done in my own business, where I've got 200 people working in one unit, where we have spent more time of actually explaining the importance of inner governance, listening to ourselves through some quiet time. And in the process, we have found that one major value system which we have forgotten, and which is very much in the Indian ethos, is we have never forgiven people. And relationship actually exists if we have actually a value system of forgiveness. For that, I think one of the major causes we have seen is there's a lot of fear among people. Though we have progressed technologically, but I think we have become more weaker human beings. And when we put the word human and being, I think our connection to the being part is very less. Our entire investments in the last several years has been on technology, process, and the human part, outside character building, presentations and all that. But I think many and very few organizations should or realize that now is a time where we have to connect to the being, because that is the source of our energy. That's the source of our strength. And I think in a very simple way, I can put it, we are operating more from the platform of fear rather than love. That's why, most of the people do not want to stick up onto companies. And that is why there's a big attrition problem attracting talents in small, medium organizations. They're in larger organizations, but the joyfulness and the wholesomeness is absent. So to conclude, I think we have to spend little time on the being part. And I think there is also a little bit of spiritual bent required today in these critical times. I think that makes the relationship very strong. Thank you.
Wow, that is a really deep and beautiful and very compassionate philosophy, Mohan. I really appreciate you highlighting this and the importance of this. If I have to connect this with something that you said a little while ago, you talked about how a lot of the entrepreneurs or small businesses, because of the pressing constraints that they're dealing with, may not really want to invest in human capital development so much. So how do you actually get them to focus on this aspect of, quiet time, self-awareness? Because this is something which takes time, and you don't get results straight away.
So
how have you been able to do that?
Yeah, I'll give one example. My own example and also an example from other company. See, I'm doing a business of supply chain logistics with large corporates like Unilever, Kimberly-Clark, big MNCs. Now, the customer requirements are changing every minute, especially in FMCG industry. And we being in supply chain, and when we are saying during the COVID time, supply chain and logistics became a very important subject. The only way we can actually bring the change in an organization is going up to the last mile delivery. The person who's working in an MSME is not highly technology oriented. Still, there is a long way to go. Industrial 4.0 has to come along. It has still to come. So the man at the bottom of the pyramid has to be the person who has to be also understood, right from the managing director to the last man. So I think all of us have one thing in common, is that we are all human beings. Our feelings, our needs are the same. So we brought in an organization a planned program where 1 year we will work only on improving the connectedness between the organization, in between the people. And we have seen the results that we have brought in customer complaints practically to zero in the last few years. And we deal with a product like Huggies, which is a product which has got a very high impact of hygiene, safety. And even one mistake, we can go into a wrong position. So I think we have spent a lot of time in understanding people, giving some opportunity to sit alone, sit in groups, do a self-realization process, though it is very cumbersome, but I think that makes sense. I've also done a program with a packaging company recently. They deal with about 90 companies. They supply to e-commerce companies packaging material. The only way we change this company is to bring a transformational program by bringing something, where we connect to people, and we got excellent results. And we have realized that people at the bottom or top have the same feelings. And I think most of us do not bring results, or relationship gets into a problem because of fear. And fear also drives ego. I think that's where we have understood that if we remove that factor, there's a lot of abundance, and we come from the deficiency driven to abundance inspired. Thank you.
Fantastic. So many home truths, especially the last two about fear driving the ego and the need for an abundance mindset. Excellent. Paul, would you like to share your own story?
Sure. Why don't I'd like to rewind back. Let me rewind back to 2017. I was in Japan at that time as one of the managing directors of Randstad Japan. We had 3. And my boss in Amsterdam, in fact, I was at INSEAD in France studying about transformational leadership, in fact, coincidentally. My boss came over from Amsterdam. He said, Paul, things are going well for you in Japan. I said, yeah, thank you. Been working hard, great team. He said, okay, it's time for a change then. All of the coaches in the room know what I'm talking about, right? When things are going well, that's the moment to roll up your sleeves and challenge yourself, step out of your comfort zone. And I knew he was right. And he leaned in and he said, next challenge, how about India? And I had never been to India before. I never stepped foot in the country. I'd worked all through Asia, but never had an opportunity to go to India. So I was given a mission, which I accepted, which I think was mission possible in the end, sounded impossible in the beginning. That was to turn around Randstad India. And you may know, but Randstad India was in trouble for 8 years. We were a sinking ship in India. With 38 countries where Randstad operates, we were number 38 on all metrics. India was really in a tough situation. So I was sent over, a guy who had never been to India, who knew nothing about incredible India, arriving right around when GST was, actually when demonetization was announced. So what a time to arrive in India. Well, I'll tell you what, the short story is that in 4 years, we went from number 38 to number 1 in the group, Randstad globally, on almost every metric. And I'm often asked, how did we do it? But I'm going to start with the very beginning when I arrived. I was absolutely lost. I left a place that I had very few blind spots in Japan. And then I arrived in India where all I had was blind spots. The first thing I did was I went out to meet people. I did something called a pulse check. I encourage all leaders to do this, a pulse check. The pulse check is to understand how people are feeling. Just to Mohan's point as well, we're talking about human beings, right? The best way to find out how they're feeling is not to tell them, but to listen. And my dad back in Canada growing up used to say, 2 ears, 1 mouth. And when I was a young guy, I didn't understand what that meant, but then I got it. So I traveled around the country. I met 150 people across the organization, 75 offices across India. I went everywhere from Guwahati all the way down to Cochin, you name the city, I've been there in India where we have locations. And I asked the same questions to everybody and I listened. I resisted the urge to tell and I listened. After doing my grand tour around the country, I had a notebook full of notes and I started to see the overlap. And with that, I got the pulse of the organization. Once I had the pulse, then we could co-create a plan to take the organization into the future with the team, of course. And we did that. So, I think that's a really important point that I raise is the pulse check. The leaders who are getting it and the organizations who are getting it have leaders who are in touch with the pulse of the people. The organizations that are not getting it, that are going off the track, that are in survival mode, they lost control or lost the touch on the pulse. So it's very important. It's very important to listen, to understand what the needs are of people, what motivates them, what their motivational buttons are, and then work towards pushing those. And Mohan mentioned something as well. We have data at Randstad. We've done it around the world. We've done quite deep dive studies. We found out why people join companies, why they stay, and why they leave. Across every demographic, across every type of organization, from very small companies to MSMEs to large companies. And there's one overlapping factor. People join because of the leader. So people join people. Money is always in the picture, but people join people somewhere in there in the top 3. They stay because of people. They leave because of people. When you lift up the layer, what does that really mean? They stay with a leader who invests in them, that develops them, that mentors them, that guides them. They will not leave that leader. So I think this is a really powerful message for leaders of MSMEs as well. Invest in your people, spend time with them, and they will stay with you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Paul, and for sharing your own story of about the grand tour that you did and how you cultivated your own awareness by listening and being patient before you actually started figuring out how to tackle this challenge which had been handed to you. I'm speaking of challenges. Mohan, I want to ask you, are there some different levels at which the relationship dynamic or the challenges play out in the MSME sector? For example, you talked about friends coming together to start a business, and you spoke about businesses which are run by families. So how does it actually play out in these different categories? Are there any similarities or trends that you've been noticing?
Yeah. So, we have categorized that, there are 3 types of major businesses in Indian MSMEs. One is basically the family managed companies. For years together, they have been running businesses. And my experience, particularly in manufacturing and some in the service sector, in a family, the major challenge is from one generation to other generation. Now, the older generation started with nothing, but they had the sense of wisdom to start a business. They had the courage to build a business. But all along, because of challenges, they became very conservative. in the years to come, they not only developed business, but they became very conservative and they were not ready to empower their own people. But the younger generation's challenge is they want to grow. They are very open. They are transparent. They take people along with them. They have come from that, culture of not parent to child. They want adult to adult culture. But this is not acceptable to the older generation. Then there is a rift in the family management companies. And in the rift, there are people are there who do not know whom to, agree towards. The senior management who have started the company or the younger management who see growth and bring growth in the company. So there is a relationship issue in major Indian companies. And that's why the succession is not happening in the MSMEs. Many of the MSMEs, what I have seen, their challenge is succession planning because they have not been able to develop that relationship, that cohesiveness, and bringing the same, purpose, vision of the business to take forward. Second challenge in family marriage relationship is India being a traditional, we have a different culture by itself. People have a more respect towards the elders. It is very difficult to uh, go against them or dissent in some opinions against some business challenges. So I think these are one challenges which we have seen. But the only way to resolve is to have some mentor, bring some coach, and understand that both are right in their own way. But the problem, if it is not resolved at the initial stage, this can result in a big relationship. And that is my experience that most of the family managed companies, after a certain stage, they are not able to grow. The other challenge in family managed companies is when professional managers come and they want to completely turn around the company. So that is the time the trust deficit is there between the owners and the professional manager or the professionals who want to run the company. I think that is basically driven from the fact that fear is the key because we are not ready to accept that, there is somewhere in life you have to give. And giving what? You have to give some time to listening to people and ensuring that, you give some freedom, respect to people. I think that's where the relationship problem starts. Now, come to the second major challenge in India is most of the professionals today, they do not want to continue working for a longer time. The opportunities are many. So a few friends come together only because of relationship. But I've seen in my last 25 years, many companies, after first 5 years, these relationships turn out to be very difficult for people to even have personal relationship after some time. The major factor is, I think, there's no cohesiveness and there's no cultural same value system after a few years' time. I think the challenge becomes that how we can actually bring this togetherness. I think that is where there's a huge requirement of very, experienced coaches to guide these youngsters to bring them together and understand that relationship doesn't exist only on a time-bound program. It is something much deeper. And I think that's where there's a lot of role to play, especially by organizations like coaching organizations. So I think there's a big need for that. But these challenges are increasing. That's why the number of years of MSMEs in India are not many compared to other countries. I think that is one of the reasons. Third is basically, when you're joint ventures with MSMEs, there's a big problem because the cultural difference between a large nation like India, where we have so many diversity, so many challenges, but with the country, especially the East, if you see Far East, the culture is totally different. So I think there's a big challenge of understanding, maintaining that relationship. And I've seen many organizations have lost business opportunities because they have not been able to continue the relationship at the top and also articulate down the line. That's my experience, what speaks about MSMEs.
Fantastic. That's such a clear and lucid analysis and insight of what you observe, in terms of the generational conflicts, the clash which happens when different personalities come together, and of course the clash of cultures. And also the point that you mentioned, Mohan, of people not wanting to work for very long. And I must confess, I wanted to retire at 40. Somehow it didn't happen and I'm still here. Yeah, so no, I think it really resonated with me when you said that. And also that you talked about the opportunities for coaching and mentoring in these organizations. So coaches, are you listening? This is music to our ears. Paul, what have you observed?
I have some thoughts on this as well. Yeah, I'll take it from a slightly different angle. I've been involved with M&A both sides of M&A. At Randstad, but also previously having sold a company, and I've bought companies as well. And often we're buying MSMEs, so we're buying small and medium-sized companies. And to Mohan's point, a lot of times it's the founder sitting across the table from me, along with my team. And I can tell you, well, in M&A, whether you're buying a company that's worth $20 million US or $1 billion, an M&A is not an easy task. It's actually very similar. In fact, the bigger one might be easy because there's less emotion involved. The smaller size M&As, acquiring an MSME, is always much more problematic because there's so much emotion. It's a baby. And you're basically saying, it's time to let the baby go. And there's a reason they're at the table. It might be financially, or it could be they just reach a certain scale and just can't take it to the next level, or no heir to take it over, no son, daughter, and so on to take over the business. So at one point, they talk about exit. But I've been at the table many times with founders who were convinced that it was time to do this. And we got to the very final stage after months of due diligence and so on to sign the contract, pen in hand, in front of us, and they put the pen down and said, I can't do it. It's happened more than once. So to the coaches out there, here's an interesting opportunity from my perspective. When a founder or the second generation, to be honest, is looking at an exit, an event as we would call it, right? And it could be a joint venture, it could be a partial acquisition or a full sale. There's a big opportunity for coaching at that moment, because it is an extremely stressful moment for that leader, for that founder or the founder's son or daughter to make that decision, because the company is like a family and in many cases like a baby. And the decision to let it go and to do it with purpose is extremely difficult, but needs to have a high level of commitment as well. A coach can be extremely valuable through that process. I can tell you the leaders that I've engaged with when we were in the M&A process, having a coach behind the scenes working with that leader would have brought significant benefits. So I'm actually learning a lesson here today. And I think in future M&As that I'll be involved with, I will recommend that we engage with a coach to be part of that journey.
That is a fantastic idea. And I
think I'm a big fan of coaching, Tushima, by the way. I'm a big fan of coaching. My coach, Marshall Goldsmith, is a great guy. I visited his home a couple months back in the US. We had a great time together. And the lessons I learned from him, I use in my own organization right now. But I want to say something, Tushima. You mentioned that you thought you'd retire at 40, but I got asked this question when I was back in the US and Canada, because a lot of my friends are around my age and they're all kind of looking ahead. And almost everybody's in countdown mode to retiring as soon as possible. And they asked me, so Paul, when are you going to retire? And I said, never. I absolutely believe that waking up in the morning every day and having purpose is so important to a long and healthy life. I don't think we should ever truly retire. Maybe you graduate and go on to something new, a new challenge. But that sense of adrenaline and purpose every morning to get up, to have to do something, I think is really a key to staying alive and well.
Excellent. And I just love the energy with which you said that. It's so infectious. Great. So both of you talked about, the importance of coaching, and I know Abhi wants to come in. Abhi, I'm sure there are a lot of questions. The chat box is literally on fire. I've been looking at it. So I just want to ask this one last thing to Mohan and Paul, and then Abhi, I'll hand it over to you. So you both very clearly talked about the importance of coaching, especially when it comes to, the challenges and the opportunities available in the MSME and startup sector. If there's one piece of advice that you would have for coaches who are working in this sector or who want to work in this sector, what would that be? Mohan, could we hear from you first?
I think I may be very straight to the point. I think we should not copy our, examples from any other organization. We should become more authentic to listening to the clients, especially the MSME owners, from their problem angle, because they are located in such a region or such a different business. That is one part. But second part is, their own experiences, they can answer you. But I think we should be authentic listeners.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Mohan. Yes, authentic listener and adapt yourself to the specific context of the sector instead of trying to, impose or reimpose some previous model. All right, great. Paul, what's your advice?
Absolutely believe just as when I walk into the room to do a pulse check with one of my colleagues, there's no vanilla cookie cutter approach to what we do. Huh? And as coaches, I think you would agree. It's not a template. You don't pull it off the shelf and say, I'm going to apply this. Every situation is different and must be customized. So I think that's really important, just to build off what Mohan said as well. Otherwise, we're not truly adding value. If we talk about adding value means to address the challenge that individual or that organization is having and provide a route to a solution. Not provide the solution, that's not what coaches do, provide the route to the solution, right? So I think it's really important to avoid the trap of copy pasting.
Thank you so much. Well, there you have it. Abhilasha, I'm sure you have a lot of questions for Mohan and Paul, so over to you.
Thank you so much, Tushima. What a beautiful discussion, and so many points came out. And like Tushima said, the chat box is on fire and there's so many questions, so I'll get to the questions right away. First one for you, Mohan. If we invest more time on the top team to build right attitudes, does it naturally get imbibed in the organization as the attitudes a role model? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think part one is right. The attitudinal change starts from the top management. But, I think there's a lot of investment patience to drive down this cultural change, attitudinal change at the bottom of the pyramid. I'll give one example just to say that if you want to see a change in an organization, it should not be much lectures or, just one-to-one training. It has to be activity based in an MSME. I'm saying in the context because most of the people coming in MSMEs today are from rural India. And they're very good in actually doing an activity. They may not be able to express, but through an activity, I've seen a lot of changes. Example, we can promote, I've done something very unique, bringing some innovations at the grassroots level, which can be expressed in a weekly forum. And because of that, we can see the attitudinal change. So we have to show proof to the people that this is happening. So I think attitudinal change from the top is the start, but it has to be articulated down with activities, and it has to be recognized, rewarded throughout the year, and then it becomes a part of the cultural change of attitude.
Thank you, Mohan. Next one for you, Paul. You spoke about building relationships that serve you in good times and bad. What's your secret sauce of doing it continuously?
That's a great question. Thank you, Abhi, and to the person who asked it. Well, I think it takes effort, huh? Building relations is not something that happens organically. We heard that earlier. It's not something you just wake up and you have a relationship or trust. Think about your own relationships, your own personal relationship. It takes a lot of work. Sometimes can be quite frustrating as well. Huh? And by the way, sometimes first impressions are not accurate. I think it's one of the nuggets of wisdom that I've picked up over the years. There are people that I've met in the beginning that I thought I wouldn't connect with and I wouldn't get along with. But in the end, over a long period of time, we actually became very close, whether they were customers, colleagues, competitors even. I mean, the reality is that we have to be careful with first impressions as well. But it takes effort. And I think this is also something we talk about, even simply how we kind of schedule our days. Huh? We talk about time management. A lot of us have fallen in the trap again during COVID of sitting in front of the computer from morning till night. You don't build relationships through a computer screen. As we come out of COVID, it's very important that we get back to the touch element and devote time to it as well. So I'll go back to what I said earlier, spending time with people, 2 ears, 1 mouth, avoiding the urge to become the guru, to tell rather than to listen. But making that a priority is very important. In fact, I will tell you, after this session today, I'm jumping in my car and I'm going to a networking event this evening in Tokyo, which is a fascinating event. It's actually a Japanese sake tasting event. and there'll be 40 CXOs there. And I'm going to meet some new people this evening, and I'm going to start building some relationships. And there'll be a lot of coffee meetings that'll come in the following weeks. But I make a point of doing this. It's very important that you prioritize, take advantage of the opportunities to meet new people and expand your horizons.
Thank you for sharing that, Paul. A lot of nuggets in there. Now, we all spoke about purpose and shared purpose and the fact that people work with people. How do organizations and entrepreneurs reconcile between the purpose and the focus on profit or costs and top line and the bottom line? So how do you reconcile between those two? Your thoughts?
Was that for me? Mohan, go ahead. Mohan.
Yes,
Mohan,
yes.
go ahead. I'll answer later.
Yeah. So I think in the last few years, I have seen the word purpose has become very important. And slowly people have started realizing that even planet has also become important because of environmental factors. But now reconciling the word bottom line, top line, and particularly profit, in my experience, and I'm telling in the Indian context, there's a huge scope for improving the profitability within the organization by people intervention. I call it a word called, there is a lot of price of non-conformance happening in Indian organizations. So I think the bottom line is nothing but a result of the strong purpose and values which has to be brought down among the people within the organization. So I think the purpose is very important. But the only challenge is that we cannot say that bottom line and top line is different from the purpose. Okay, the purpose is to build an overall business, create an impact, social impact, improve governance, improve the environment. But I think the purpose doesn't actually disturb the overall profitability. In fact, it supports, enhances the profitability. But the problem is most of the organizations, the expression is wrong. Like when they express, they start talking more on the profitability. And I'm talking absolutely from a ground level. When I see entrepreneurs coming and shouting at people that we are losing money, that itself is a wrong statement. In fact, we can say that our purpose, if it is understood, probably our profits can go up. I think there the trust factor, the commitment factor of the top management is seen. So I think we have to work in a larger purpose with a better consciousness. I think profitability and bottom line, top line will automatically grow in an organization. It cannot be separated out. Thank you.
The narratives have to change. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mohan. Now, Paul, for you, and given that you've been an entrepreneur and run multiple organizations, what should one focus on when it comes to being an entrepreneur?
Well, we've talked a lot about the relationship part. I absolutely agree with that. I mean, we can talk until the end of time about the importance of relationships. By the way, it's not only for entrepreneurs, for anyone who wants to truly make a positive impact on the world. It's always about the 1 + 1 is 3. We're much stronger when we're together. I would come back to a point Mohan made. I really want to build off of that. So when you're an entrepreneur or you're running a small company and you're bootstrapping, the results are very important because you have to pay the rent. You have to pay the salaries. I've been there, by the way, in the midnight hour, making those collection calls just to get that money in the bank so I could pay the salaries and pay the rent of my employees as well, or for our office and our employees. But there comes a point where you kind of graduate beyond that, where you have a bit of cash in the bank and you can move forward. That's the moment actually where the conversation needs to shift away from performance and results and back to what Mohan said about purpose. One of the things we do now is we start meetings talking about people and our vision and our purpose and what we call our North Star or our true north. So we never start meetings talking about results because results are what happened yesterday, right? We'll get to results. The results will come later in the meeting. We'll finish the meeting with results. And that was painful. By the way, when I arrived in India, everybody I met wanted to start every conversation with an Excel spreadsheet. And I said, take it off, take it down. I don't want to talk about it. I know what the results are. It's my job as CEO to know the results. You're telling me about something that's already finished. We'll get to that later. I want to know why we are where we are. Let's talk about our people. Do we have the right people on our bus? Are we clear on what our vision and our purpose is? Are we moving in that direction? Are we taking action to move in that direction? Is there something we can do better to accelerate towards achieving our purpose? and so on. Then let's look at the numbers. Because we know that if we have the right people with the right purpose and leadership and direction and tools and so on, then the results should look pretty good. And if they don't, then we have a mismatch and we need to figure out what that is. And once we fix that, watch out. Possibilities are endless. It's essentially what we did when I was in India. And I tell you, we're doing that right now here in Japan as well. But it's challenging. Mohan, you talked about how India is very hierarchical and that age comes with some gravitas. Exactly the same in Japan, by the way. And so creating a culture where people who are maybe not at the top of the hierarchy are able to express themselves freely is also something really important that an entrepreneur needs to do. So to wrap up, Abhi, I would say entrepreneurs that I meet tend to be powerful, tend to be charismatic. They tend to be very driven and sometimes extremely persistent and even a bit hard-headed. Huh? All of these are good qualities for an entrepreneur, by the way. Not necessarily great qualities to be a leader who's going to bring people along on the journey in the long term. So I come back to what I said earlier about conversations need to start about people and purpose before you get into the numbers and results.
Very powerful, Paul. Mohan, here's a question for you. How can a friend become a lifelong partner in the joint business? Coming from the point that we start a business with some friends, sometimes it's a family-owned business, sometimes two different people sort of come together and work. So how can a friend, what would be the ingredients or the elements one needs to look at to have that as a lifelong partner?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question because today, you don't have lifelong partners also, personal life for a long time. So I think answer is very simple. I think, over a period of time, maybe because I've come now the maybe final stage of life, but I think there is a higher consciousness we have to understand. I think the problem is, we understand life momentarily. See, in that moment, in that spur of a moment, we understand life. I think if you have a little bit of, different ideology or maybe different idea about life, see, life is going to have challenges, life is going to have problems. But I think if we are able to understand that, higher consciousness that for what we have come, why we have come, and there's a reason for which we have come together, I think that understanding has to be forced over a period of time. I think this requires a lot of conversation, understanding, spending time. And also, we have to go not just because of that business, but it has to be go beyond business. I think that's number one. But I think the most important thing I've seen is, our parents have told us from the beginning when we were children that one of the greatest tool is to forgive. I think we have a very, very difficult, decision to forgive somebody. And I've seen most of the time apologizing to a person solves most of the problem. I've been associated with an international organization called IFC, International Organization Initiatives and Changes, sorry. But we have been taught that, that the moment you apologize, I think we have forgotten that, we have never been able to honestly forgive ourselves, forget forgiving others. I think that has to be a little deep drawn if you want to have a longer relationship. Second, I think relationship over a period of time has to be tested. So we require a lot of patience also. And third, I think it is all ultimately what our father of the nation said, that, for need you have come together, but it is that greed that separates you. So I think there's a small difference. Over a period of time, people have come together for a purpose, a need. But I think that needs goes back and it goes back to greed. I think that, understanding of life is very important. But there's no fixed formula. And last, I would say, in business, there is one thing. If your business has a larger purpose, the impact is much on, impact is much on a larger group of people. I think the relationship sustains for longer time. But if the impact is only for getting money for two people or two families, I think the relationship over a period of time doesn't grow much. I've seen some organizations where they had a larger purpose and the impact was much higher. The relationship between two people who started has been there for months and years together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohan. Maybe just one last question. Paul, for you, and given that you've come from out and worked in India for a long time. It'll be good to get your perspective on how can we tackle the hierarchical way of working in India as entrepreneurs.
That's
Tough
a
one,
challenge.
sorry, I had.
Yeah, that's a big challenge, that question. I don't think we solve it in this session, but I can say there are certain behaviors, huh? And by the way, all the coaches in the room know what I mean when we talk about behavior, because a lot of us focus on behavioral coaching, right? And it really begins with it's how we interact and engage with our colleagues. If you're in the top of this hierarchy, like many of the leaders who we coach are, then there has to be self-awareness around the behaviors and how they create a culture of hierarchy. So it starts with the leader, absolutely, kind of creating an environment in the organization where somebody who's brand new, that newbie, that maybe 20-something-year-old, has an opportunity to speak freely. And so part of it is the behavior that the leader displays. I'll give you an example, at least in my organization, whether you have 10 people or 1,000, it doesn't matter. If I walk into one of my offices, I have a choice. I can turn right and go surround myself with all the folks who are around my age, 50 plus. We'll call them the perennials, right? Or I can turn left and go hang out with the young folks, the millennials. By default, I turn left. Because when I turn left, I'm actually sending out a message to this gang over here of perennials that it's good to spend time with the younger folks. And by the way, not go and tell, but to listen. So I do that by default now. I don't have to try anymore, but I had to train myself to do it. Interestingly, when a leader walks the talk that way, others follow. And then you start to create a culture in the organization, especially when the leader walks over there to listen and to learn and to give those people an opportunity to take risks. So I'm a big fan of doing things like the Shark Tank approach. There's that TV show called the Shark Tank, that kind of approach where you let everyone in the organization have an opportunity to come up with an idea, pitch it, and then run with it and give them full support to make it happen. And when they achieve it, or if they don't, you still celebrate. You celebrate the journey and the effort. I think those little things that we do as leaders really create a culture and helps to break down the hierarchy.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing everything that both you and Mohan did. So Mohan, Paul, Tushima, 60 minutes have just flown by. Yeah. I wish we had more time, but we're all looking to go to the next session. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing all the nuggets. People are an important aspect of our lives. Getting started is easy, but building on it is a challenge, and that's what we have to focus on. The purpose is something that will hold us together, right? And Mohan, you spoke about the inner consciousness and being in touch with that inner consciousness. These are some of the nuggets that I've walked away with, and many more, and I'm sure we're going to benefit from it quite a bit. So thank you for being here today with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And greetings from Tokyo. Thank you, Mohan, as well.
Thank you, Paul.
Wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And thanks to so many who are sending me messages and connecting on LinkedIn all the way from Tokyo. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Paul
you.
and Mohan.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Paul, Mohan,
Bye.
Tushima. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All the best.
Thank
Bye.
you.